Hey guys, how y'all doing? It is a bright and early morning here in Japan, and I think I am gonna go grab a bite to eat and then get to work for the day. Holy shit, are you serious? Get your quick balls. Let's get the quick ball out. Well, that was rather unfortunate, but at the very least, Pokemon Crystal comes out today on the Nintendo 3DS eShop, so perhaps I can catch Suicune in Pokemon Crystal on 3DS, and perhaps you can also catch a Suicune in Pokemon Crystal on 3DS. And on the note of Pokemon Crystal, how about we talk about some fun facts about Pokemon Crystal? Here we go. To record the video, but it's not very nice at all, so I think I'm just gonna go inside and do this. It ended up being super cold out there, like as if an Articuno was using Icy Wind over and over and just slapping everything around. It was quite terrible. But here we are in the office, and let's talk about Pokemon Crystal. That's right, Pokemon Crystal is inbound for the Nintendo 3DS on January 26th, and are you excited for it? I know I am. I'm pretty stoked to play this again on my 3DS with my fancy lithium battery, my fancy 2 screens, and without the risk of the cartridge battery just dying and all my Pokemon dying along with it. But yes, it is finally fun facts about Pokemon Crystal time, so let's get to it. Fact number 1, Pokemon Crystal was the first Pokemon game that allowed you to play as a female. I think this is important because it was a big step forward in expanding the series' appeal amongst both genders, and apart from it just being a big step, the only interesting thing I really had to say about this was that the character Chris, as the female character, she was actually scrapped in favor of a brand new character design by Takao Uno called Lyra, and I honestly think that Lyra was a much better character design, so I was totally in favor of that. But yeah, first Pokemon female playable character, pretty big stuff. Fact number 2, the original version of Pokemon Crystal was a mere 1 megabyte. That was the size of the flash ROM dump included on the original cartridges, and wow, that is pretty small compared to a lot of games that you see these days. That means on my MacBook Pro I could fit like 500,000 copies of Pokemon Crystal, and just imagining if all those copies of Pokemon Crystal were actually real physical copies, and I had some kind of Scrooge McDuck-esque pit in my house, that makes me very happy. As for the 3DS version of Pokemon Crystal, it is going to take up 130 blocks of space on your SD card, and that is apparently equivalent to 16 megabytes. So I kind of wonder, why is it so big compared to the original game, but perhaps it's to incorporate the Game Boy Link cable functionality into the actual game, or because there's all sorts of workarounds necessary to emulate Game Boy Color on the 3DS, or more space is required to make it compatible with the 3DS firmware. I don't really know. But yeah, 1 megabyte of space. That's like a megabyte that there's only one of. Pretty small. Just another note regarding Pokemon releases on the 3DS eShop. Pokemon Blue, Red, and Yellow were also under a megabyte, but each of them took up 11 megabytes of space. So I'm curious why they ballooned in size too. And by comparison to Crystal, they would be pretty small because, you know, there's only a color palette of 4 colors. What do we have? Black and white, light gray, dark gray, and all the music, just like in Crystal, is synthesized, so it wouldn't take up much space. You don't need to put samples in or anything. But I wonder what that 10 megabytes is dedicated to. Fact number 3. The story was focused on Suicune. As you know, if you played Pokemon Crystal, Suicune was actually promoted from merely scampering about as one of the 3 legendary dogs to actually playing a prominent role in the main story of the game. And this is significant because it's actually the first time that a legendary Pokemon played a big role in the story of a Pokemon game. Usually, they're just kind of lurking there and waiting for you to catch them. Anyways, much of the extra story in Pokemon Crystal was not tied just to Suicune, but also to this man named Usuin or Uzain. I've never known how to pronounce his name in the English version of the game, but in Japanese he's referred to as Minaki, which is much easier to pronounce, so let's just roll with that. And this Minaki character basically bumped into Suicune 10 years ago and became obsessed with catching him or her, and has been tracking him or her across Johto ever since. And you bump into Minaki across Johto several times before you end up catching Suicune, and then Minaki goes to wait in Celadon City in Kanto, where he's originally from, until you catch the other 2 legendary dogs and go to summon Ho-Oh. In Pokemon Crystal, you can't actually capture Ho-Oh until you've got all of the legendary dogs. There are a lot of eccentric weirdos in the Pokemon universe who are chasing after specific Pokemon, and that considered, I must say that Minaki has probably one of the biggest boners for a Pokemon of anyone in the series. It's pretty amazing, and I guess at least he's not into the weird kinky costume play like Bill, but yeah, he takes it pretty far. On a side note, it's interesting that in Pokemon Crystal, in the game's opening, you actually see the Unknown communicating with Suicune and calling it to the runes of Alph, but in the actual game, those 2 stories are kind of separate generally. You don't really see them come together the way that you'd expect from watching the opening cutscene. But whatever, I was kind of waiting to see if there was going to be some sort of deeper connection the whole time, and there wasn't, but that's how it is. And what's interesting is that actually in Pokemon Movie 3, it is Entei who has a connection with the Unknown, not Suicune. And makes me realize that Raikou just has been getting totally shafted this whole time. Although I guess Raikou was part of a couple good decks in the Pokemon TCG at the very least. Fact number 4, Pokemon sprites were animated for the very first time. From Red to Blue through to Gold and Silver, unless you played Pokemon Stadium, you basically had to imagine Pokemon moving. It wasn't something that was in the games, and this finally changed with Crystal, where they actually introduced some short battle animations at the beginning of each battle, and longer animations when you viewed each Pokemon's profile in the Pokedex. And this is pretty cool, added a nice little touch of liveliness to the games, but curiously, it was actually axed after until Pokemon Emerald, and I wonder why that was. Perhaps it was just because the payoff for the effort to animate all these wasn't really there at that point. Don't know. What do you think? Number 5. The Japanese version of Pokemon Crystal was off the goddamn chain. Yes, the Japanese version of Pokemon Crystal was way more tricked out, largely in part due to the inclusion of functionality around the Pokemon Mobile System GB, which was a feature that utilized the Game Boy Mobile adapter, a product that was released only in Japan in 2001, which allowed you to hook up your Game Boy Color to a mobile phone to use functions over the internet. Way ahead of its time. A very sick feature, and people living outside of Japan could only look at it longingly. Using the Game Boy Mobile adapter, players could battle and trade online. You could subscribe to something called Pokemon News, which compiled cute little news reports from the data of other players. You could even receive a GS ball, which opened up a game event in the Ilex Forest, which allowed you to capture Celebi, and the odd egg was actually received via a ticket that you received online, which you could then take and redeem with the daycare man to receive your odd egg. And A fact about this odd egg that's kind of interesting is that in the Japanese version of the game, the chance of hatching shiny from it was 50%. In the international versions of the game, that was only 14%. Wow, that's some serious eggly goodness right there, isn't it? I wish that I could get some eggs that would hatch me shinies at a 50% rate. Pretty sick. Also, the Pokemon Center in Goldenrod City was replaced with a Pokemon Communication Center, which basically allowed you to do all the battling and trading and so on, and there were even microtransactions, which would surely cause a young Jim Sterling to piss himself. The Pokemon Mobile System GB feature of Pokemon Crystal is something that never made it outside Japan, and even in Japan it was canned in 2002, but its impact on the series cannot be understated. This was basically the genesis of Pokemon online play, and as we know, this continued on the GBA with the GBA wireless adapter, which allowed for online functionality in Pokemon Fire Red and Pokemon Leaf Green. And ever since, this has been a standard feature in the series. But here it was in its very first iteration in Pokemon Crystal in Japan. This also reminds me of an era when the Japanese mobile market was just way more sophisticated than what was out in the West. Honestly, like mobile gaming and things like that took off years and years and years before they did overseas. You had things like picture messaging and 3G broadband internet for phones. And it was just an awesome time to have a cell phone in Japan. Things were super sophisticated. You could even watch TV on your cell phone for free. And actually, you still can watch cell phone TV for free. And actually, I can show you that on my old school phone here. One second. So here's an old Japanese phone, and let me just show you what she can do. To be honest, I kind of miss flip phones. I mean, not only are they kind of nostalgic piece of equipment, but brings me back to an era when we were not spending quite so much time glued to our smartphones. So I don't know if you can see, but I have my little TV ready to boot here, so I'm gonna do just that. I'm gonna flip the screen around here, and I'm gonna pull up the antenna. All right. And we're upside down, so flip that. And there you go, you can watch TV on this old-ass Japanese phone. So if you move to Japan and you're thinking about getting a television, think, do you really need a television, or is your computer good enough? Because you can just buy a cheap-ass cell phone for like 10 bucks and enjoy television on that. Of course, to really enjoy it, you'd actually have to want to watch Japanese television, which I can't say is something I want to do too often. Of course, things have changed with the release of the BlackBerry, the iPhone, and so on, but yeah, early 2000s was just a crazy time to have Japanese mobile technology in your hand. It was really good stuff. Fact number 6, mysterious graffiti. This next one is not the biggest thing in the world, but it's just a cute little Easter egg that popped up in Pokemon Crystal. And what this is if you head to the roof of the Celadon Mansion, and you just go around the corner from the staircase and press A while facing the wall, a message box will pop up that says, "There's graffiti on the wall. Blah, 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 added a mustache." And I always wondered, what was that graffiti? What do you think? Fact number 7, Dratini riddles. So once you're able to go to the Dragon's Den in Blackthorn City, if you answer the questions posed by the trainers there correctly, or rather in the most compassionate way, you will actually be gifted with a Dratini that knows Extreme Speed, a move it can't usually learn. And if you answer in a shit way, you get a Dratini that knows Leer. The Dratini gift was not in the original Gold and Silver, but it did turn up in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. So clearly the dev team looked at this addition to Pokemon Crystal and thought, yeah, that's pretty cool. Dratini with Extreme Speed, neat. P.S. If you boot up Crystal and you want that Extreme Speed Dratini, the answers are PAL, Raising, Anybody, Love or Knowledge, both. Enjoy. PPS, Dragon's Den is actually the only location in the game where you can receive a gym badge in a place which is technically not a gym. PPPS, back then and still today, I've got a crush on Claire. She's simply a badass, and what's not to like about that? Fact number 8, Pokemon Crystal has a Super Game Boy border in its code, despite the fact that it was never intended to be played on the Super Game Boy. So, Pokemon Crystal is actually a Game Boy Color exclusive, which means technically it cannot be played on the Game Boy Pocket, the Game Boy Light, the Super Game Boy, or the Super Game Boy 2. But nevertheless, people actually found a Super Game Boy border in the game's code. And this is actually a leftover from the Japanese version of Pokemon Gold that just kind of lurks there. It was never deleted. And this is not so interesting in itself, but what is interesting is the question of why you could not play Pokemon Crystal on the old Game Boy, even though it was very closely modeled after Pokemon Gold and Silver, and only had some minor changes to the storyline, the addition of the animated sprites, and so on. And the answer to that question probably has two parts. Part one is the fact that Pokemon Crystal used the upgraded Game Boy Color cartridge in order to be compatible with the features in the Japanese game that were included to utilize the Game Boy mobile adapter, which I mentioned earlier, and other, things like the Pokemon GS2. And the other part of this is likely that it was a marketing move to have a Game Boy Color exclusive Pokemon game to drive the late sales of the Game Boy Color. Interestingly, Pokemon Crystal actually came out in 2000, just months prior to the release of the Game Boy Advance in 2001, so how pissed off were you if you bought a Game Boy Color just to play Pokemon Crystal and then watched all your friends as they were playing Golden Sun just a few months later? Fact number 9. You cannot catch a Mankey in Pokemon Crystal. On to the final fact. Fact number 10. Pokemon Crystal was the last Pokemon game to feature the "Gotta Catch 'em All" slogan on the box. For me, Pokemon Crystal was really the bottle stopper on an era of Pokemon that felt so wild and fresh and really filled me with a sense of adventure. And as you know, if you follow me on my social media, follow me on my social media if you don't, I'm a huge Pokemon fan to this very day, but really, I think that many people consider Generation 2 as the pinnacle of the series, or rather people think of Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the remakes, as perhaps the pinnacle of the series, and essentially Pokemon Crystal was a superior version of the original Gold and Silver, so it only makes sense that it should be very highly regarded. And I think that really, Pokemon Crystal was released at a time where there was this absolutely perfect balance between the global hype for the franchise and the freshness. And of course, in time, no matter how great something is, how new it is, freshness wears off. But this was really a representation of the hype and excitement that was bundled into those first two generations of Pokemon games. For me, for you, for everyone in the world. This was probably the biggest time to be into Pokemon. It's kind of appropriate then that Pokemon Crystal was the final game in the series to feature "Gotta Catch 'em All" on the English versions of the box, and thereafter the phrase was retired. Of course, it was brought back after the release of Pokemon X and Y, but it was never again featured on the box. And beyond featuring "Gotta Catch 'em All" on the box, there were so many cool things about Pokemon Crystal. Whether it be how the ice path was actually revamped to look like an ice path, or one of the many series firsts, whether it be the names of places appearing when you entered the area, the addition of the series' first move tutor, the series' first battle tower, the legendary Pokemon battle music, in the Japanese versions, the online battling and trading. We cannot forget that the Celebi event was the first time that you could catch an event Pokemon in-game. And yeah, there were certainly a lot of firsts for a third pillar game, and Crystal was certainly a much more robust sister to Gold and Silver than Yellow was to Red and Blue. So I have many fond memories of Pokemon Crystal. It really is a more polished version of the best two Pokemon games ever released. How about you? Do you have great memories of Pokemon Crystal? By the way, did you know that Generation 2 was actually supposed to be the last generation of Pokemon games? Check out this quote. "I worked with the assumption that after we put out Gold and Silver, my work as far as Pokemon was concerned would be done. I didn't intend to make any more Pokemon titles. I even thought that once we entered the 21st century, it would be time for me to do something else entirely. I remember that when Gold and Silver were released, I felt like a burden had finally been lifted from my shoulders. We'd had our sights set on the finish line of Gold and Silver for so long, and now that we'd finally completed the major series running right through from Red and Blue, I felt that I could say to Tajiri-san, I fulfilled my duty." Thank goodness that was not the case. So, which of these Pokemon Crystal fun facts was the most interesting for you? Or is there something else you love about Pokemon Crystal, like the sexy Colgate toothpaste cartridge, or just the quest to capture the calm and alluring Suicune? Let me know in the comments. And yeah, that is all for today, but thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, a comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. Thank you so much, and we will talk again in the near future. Thanks so much, and bye-bye.